Tonight, sources report several incidents of illegal poaching perpetrated by the renegade fueling station, the Colossus, and their pirate allies. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Hoth Topics, a podcast about Star Wars. John, welcome back to the actual podcast. So, right now, going on is the newest season of Clone Wars. Everybody's talking about it, and we are not, because we are so far behind that we still haven't even finished our Resistance episodes. We are going to take a crack at getting through Resistance, finish up Season 2, and probably do that over the course of a couple episodes here, but we're just going to fire through as many as we can and bring it to you guys. So I really hope that everything works out well where you guys are. I hope that we can bring you a little bit of joy, a little bit of Star Wars nonsense while we're going through this craziness. So before we dive right into the episodes of Resistance, John, anything Star Wars-y going on in your life outside that's been helping you get through this whole crazy world catastrophe nonsense?
Good segue, Ian. I was actually sitting here waiting for you to stop talking so that I could ask you the exact same question. Genius, great minds, and such. So I realized last week when we were talking about setting up this episode that scrolling through the Hoth Topics Twitter, I see all of our fellow podcasters and content creators are out there like in overdrive because they have nothing to do at home. So why not make content? Where we, Hoth Topics, a Star Wars podcast about Star Wars, have done nothing, and I have in fact become even less productive. As some of you out there may know, I have been creating another Star Tours themed cosplay for Ian here, a Star Tours Airlines flight crew, or deck crew, I should say, costume, which just before the lockdown happened, I had all laid out on a table with a sewing machine ready to finish up sewing on some pockets. The stay-at-home suggestion hit, and
I've been calling it lockdown, quarantine.
The stay-home,
the stay-at-home,
shelter in place.
Anyways, we gotta find a Star Warsy term for this. The trash compacting.
Yeah, I like that. Since the trash compactoring happened, I have since moved that costume to my dining room table and have not touched it in 3 weeks. And now's like the perfect time because, we're not supposed to be going out and socializing and such. But that's introverted John's normal thing. So now that it's government mandated, it's not cool for me to like do the introvert thing and just sit at home and do my projects by myself.
Right.
Like I would normally do, because now it's a law or whatever. I don't know. It's too much of my high school punk rockness coming out. So what have you been up to?
Well, I was gonna say, it's hard to, when you don't have the option to do what you want to do, it's harder to. It's weird when you're ordered to not go out and do something. It gives you this sense of like what can you do and at home. And for me personally, I have, on a normal day, if I get distracted by something, I go out and I do something, and I always have like a task at hand. But when I'm stuck at home and kind of in control of my own projects and what I need to do, it's been really hard to focus on one thing. So one of the things that I wanted to do now that we're stuck here at home is I have a bunch of Legion clone miniatures. And I've been like, oh, this is a chance to paint up a whole bunch of miniatures that I otherwise haven't been able to get my hands on, and got some all ready to go and paint. I have painted one clone to completion, and I have one more that is already done. I have 15 that I need to do, and a bark speeder, I think. So yeah, it's been really hard for me to like focus on one thing. And like when the threat of the lockdown happening, I went out and I actually got the last book in the Thrawn trilogy. That's been sitting on my shelf. I drunkenly borrowed the From a Certain Point of View book. I don't even think I borrowed it. I think it just walked out of your house with it, which is still sitting on my nightstand unread. And I went to Goodwill bookstore, and I ended up with 3 or 4 Star Wars books that I just pulled randomly. I think 2 are from the Tales of the Bounty Hunter series, and then I think I picked up another one. So literally the only thing that I've done Star Wars related in terms of projects is lazily paint one clone and play some Battlefront 2. That is it. However, I went out and got Rise of Skywalker and I watched it with my family. And I think watching that by myself slash with my family and not worrying about, oh, how am I going to talk about this? I need to take notes of things for the podcast. I need to have an ear to the ground on what's going on in the Star Wars community. Watching it by myself for the second time, just in the comfort of my own home, I had a much better time with it than I think I did even the first time in theaters.
Okay.
But we'll talk more about that when we do a secondary review of Rise of Skywalker, seeing if anything's changed. Anything else we want to touch on before we dive into the wonderful world of Resistance?
I think that's it.
Cool. I'm not even caught up on Clone Wars. I've watched the Bad Batch episodes, and that's it.
I watched the Bad Batch, and I've watched one episode of Ahsoka's story. I kind of just want to wait until that storyline has its conclusion,
Right.
whatever particular adventure she's on right now, and then watch that as
Do it in a single chunk. I hear you. So, in the meantime, we have been watching Resistance.
as I was telling you just before we started. I don't know where, but in my mind, the amount of episodes that The Mandalorian had got transferred to Resistance, and I thought that this season was going to be a 10-episode season
Right.
until I was halfway through the season and realized, oh, there's still 10 more episodes.
I had the exact same experience. I was like, oh, close out with 12 episodes, and there are like 19.
Mm-hmm.
There are like 19 episodes, and we've reviewed 3. So if we tried to review 16 episodes in one go, that would kind of be madness.
Yeah. Yeah, and the amount of work that the team behind that show has done for us, I wouldn't feel right just, summing up an episode in 3 or 4 sentences before moving on.
Yeah, I agree. And I get that feeling too, oh, there's just so much stuff and Resistance is the thing we're behind on. Let's just kind of
Mhm.
bowl over it. But it's easy to say that. But once you sit down and actually start watching the content and absorbing it, then you're like, oh, right. So let's dive right into it. We already did the first 3 episodes of the Resistance second season. And so we're just going to start on the 4th episode and go on from there. Sound good?
I believe I can do this.
Excellent. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, but I believe the first episode we're going to take a look at today is called The Hunt on Celsor 3. Celsor
Correct.
3. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I thought I had already watched this episode, and I hadn't. I actually, when we started our rewatch, I started on the next one, and I very hurriedly half watched this before we started. So I'm going to let you take this one in terms of summation.
I have 2 sets of notes for this because, like you, I thought, man, I feel like I've already watched this episode, and it turns out when we did the last review, this was the last one I watched, and we just didn't review it. The Colossus needs food. They're out in space. They don't got any supplies. They're not a trading post. They're on the run. They need to figure out how they're going to feed everybody.
Didn't they run into the creature they eventually eat in the previous episode? So yeah, so they're still over the planet that they were doing the training mission on from the last episode. And the pirate's like, well, my crew's really good at capturing stuff. Let's go catch us some food. They go and they attempt to catch this food, and they get attacked by the large manta ray dragon thing from the previous episode, which, like most Star Wars, like most Star Wars creatures, is somehow impervious to harm from things like blaster fire that can blow through metal ships and annihilate them, but just kind of bounce off the backsides of animals. And they fail in this endeavor, and the pirates spread this rumor that it's all Doze's fault that they failed and he can't feed anybody, and kind of makes them look bad. So Tora and Kaz come up with this idea of attacking it from the ground because the soft underbelly is the
The soft
weak spot.
underbelly of it.
Yeah, and so apparently there was some high-powered cannon that was supposed to go in the fireball and just never got attached, and so they set that up as a ground turret on the planet below. And there's something about the pirates taking their ships, which I wasn't really paying attention for.
Yeah, they were on the ground and the dragon guy attacked. While they were on the ground, two of the pirates just like showed up, and when the dragon attacked, they ran off and jumped in the fireball and Thor's fighter and took off.
Yeah, so leaving them stranded there. The the portable battery thing that they brought to charge the cannon didn't work, so they end up plugging into the droid CB23.
Yeah, I was surprised that that droid could power that blaster, which I have a special note for.
Is used as a battery, and they end up getting the cannon to work and firing at the underside of the beast, and it is the new food source. Meanwhile, there's a sort of an underlying thing where a couple of people are talking about leaving the Colossus because they don't have food. There was a scare that Niku might leave, but instead of Niku leaving, he just sold most of his possessions to build a projector, like a sky projector, to make the marketplace look more homey, even though they're in the depths of space, which I'm feeling real hard right now with this whole with the trash compacting. It would be real nice if I could just project the sky on my ceiling. I can just walk outside, but who wants to do that?
I do
But
every day because I still have to work.
yeah, yeah, you're essential.
Not much has changed for me.
Yeah, it's just
So
easier to get around in traffic hours, huh?
yeah, it's very strange.
So what do you got
Uh,
on this one,
so
John?
first off, I'll start at the end, as most great filmmakers do. The first time I watched the episode, I didn't catch that Niku had traded all this stuff to make the projector, and I
Hmm.
thought he had traded stuff to fix a feature of the Colossus where that the marketplace would have a false sky projected. I didn't realize that he had built it.
Yeah, that was the impression I got.
Now, like any great filmmaker, start at the ending and then go back to the beginning. I made this fantastic note that the creature or reminded me a lot of one of the bosses from the Shadow of the Colossus game,
Oh,
with the exception of they didn't have to climb on its back and stab it in the neck, as I believe all monsters bosses in that game you have to do. A gun that Tam was going to put on the fireball but never got around to it before she took off. And it's definitely an E-Web blaster, like the
it just looks like an E-Web blaster, yeah.
it 100% is just an E-Web blaster that's been modified to do, instead of rapid fire, doing power up blast.
Right.
But I just like this idea that they were going to strap an artillery piece to the fireball and just they did that in Firefly where they stuck a anti-aircraft gun to the top of the cargo ship. So I enjoyed that. My one big note for this whole episode was I was painting a Corporal Medell Star Wars Legion mini during this episode. I wasn't paying too much close attention. Once I realized that this was a fetch quest episode that took place on the previously visited ice planet, kinda lost interest. This episode also did not feature a Tam mirrored storyline, which makes sense for the content. It sounded like a fun episode with lots of gags and such, but not enough to pull me away from trying to get this model skin tone coloring mixed or correct.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Pretty straightforward, fail, learn, succeed mission. It definitely felt filler-y, which, that being said, though, most of the episodes that we are going to go through, at least in this session, feel kind of filler-y.
Well, this the episodes that we watched for the next few reviews, I actually really enjoyed a lot more than episodes in the first season. Not all the time was the main antagonist the First Order.
Hmm.
It was situational antagonists. Like this episode, it was Hunger and the boss, and it reminded me a lot of Battlestar Galactica, where there is a big enemy out there, the Cylons, but there's a lot of episodes in between that where it's just about how people got by in a fleet that doesn't have a way to refuel itself or feed itself. So I kind of like that storytelling, because it wasn't just, oh, how are we going to outwit the First Order this time, but it was kind of like the average ordinary person, like how are they going to survive? And that's kind
Sure.
of, we don't like see a ton of in Star Wars, because We usually see the ramifications of this galactic civil war that's constantly happening over 3 generations.
Right.
And we don't usually get to see what the average Joe is doing just to get by in the galaxy. And that's always a story that I like to see.
And we got a little bit of that in The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. It's nice to see those things here in this one. However, we have a 19 episode season, and so far, I think 10 episodes so far, 10 episodes in, maybe 8 of them seem sort of like that. So I would prefer a more healthy balance between the two. But again, like you said, the first season was very core story heavy, which kind of has to be because you're introducing a new show. And they had more episodes and room to play around here. But regardless, this episode did feel like filler to me, even more so than some of the new ones. I like how the heavy blaster cannon felt like a heavy blaster cannon. It didn't just blast out of the thing and hit and kill the beast and it was fine. It sent out a blast so powerful that it shot the cannon backwards off of the stand that was supposed to like hold it, and blew Kaz back. So I liked that. I also appreciate how at the end when the nice pirate Sonara, how she forces her friends to apologize for stealing the ships. And they kind of just, this is a running theme throughout these episodes, is since the pirates are on board, they're just allowed to be pirates. Everybody's accepted that that's just what they are. And so they're not really all that upset when they're just like, I think the line Kaz says, you're pirates, it's what you do. So that was kind of interesting to see. I did appreciate the return of the through line joke of Niku likes food, 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 food. And, other than that, it was just a good side mission story for this episode. I agree with you on that. So shall we move on to the next one?
Let us move on to episode 5.
All right. This one is titled The Engineer. You want to take a crack at this one?
Yeah, I have a much better summary.
Gotcha.
So
neither of us had a good one last one. But together we work.
After talking about that E-Web blaster last episode, I've been scrolling through Etsy to see if anybody makes one for the Black Series 6-inch figures. Distracted myself. All right, episode 5, The Engineer. The ship is still borked. Nico has his hands full fixing things. They receive a distress call and go to investigate. They find another genius engineer named Nina that Nico takes immediate liking to, but not all is what it seems. And then in all caps, dun dun dun.
Do you want to elaborate on the dun dun dun, or?
She's a first order plant, and what it made me think is that she wasn't like a first order agent, but more of somebody that would give the first order information for money.
She was a freelance saboteur sort of mercenary
thing, yeah.
type.
But she goes around and sabotages the Colossus. Makes it look like the pirates have been draining power from the station, and she uses that distraction to disable the weapons and propulsion of the Colossus so the First Order can jump in and capture it. Luckily, Kaz is distrustful of everybody, and
he's bad at spy stuff, so he needs to learn a lesson there. At least he learned something.
Sonara's like, we're not stealing power. And he's like, yeah, you are. And then they go do research and realize that Nina has been doing something. And Niku refuses to believe him and is his second best friend. When she takes off, she leaves a hint of what they can do to fix the problem. I like this one.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
The realization that we kind of have to confront as older fans of Star Wars is that knowing that this show is geared towards a younger audience, a lot of the storylines are going to be pretty predictable because we've seen them over and over and over again in pop culture when we were growing up and throughout a bunch of stuff. So sometimes the obvious answers are going to be the right answers more than half the time in a show like this. Like one of my notes was, I like Nina. I hope she's not a double agent. And then and then, another random note later. And then after that, it just says, of course, she's a spy.
Yeah, I have a note similar to that. It's I didn't see the twist of her being a first order operative coming as I'm still in the mindset of the Empire, and the Empire being hyper xenophobic.
Right.
So I was like, oh, I thought, hey, first they're just hiring aliens. That's progressive of them.
Well, they're not hiring them to be like in their ranks, which is very, very
Right.
Empire like. Because they were perfectly happy to have Bosk on board when he was, just a paid outsider.
Yeah.
But they're not going to give him a rank or anything.
Also from.
One thing I appreciated is that this episode really highlighted how Niku is actually really skilled at mechanics,
Mm-hmm.
even though he's kind of goofy, which I guess is something I kind of forgot about because the thing that stuck with me was, his mannerisms and not necessarily his talent. And this time his talent was highlighted, and that was cool to see. I love that they made fun of Kaz for being a bad shot in the beginning because they get the distress signal. And he's like, I'll go check it out. And then they're like, take someone who can shoot with you. He's like, I've been practicing. And they just stare at him. He's like, fine. I really enjoyed that. I liked Nina as a character, and even though she was sort of betraying them, she did fit in with the whole. She felt like there was an emotional investment there on her part in order to get her job done, which is better than the obvious answer being a villain and then not really needing to. We can see the twist coming, but there's really no cost for them. I felt like there was a cost for her in this for doing what she did. I did put a mark here going, I was wondering where the pirates were going to become an issue, and then that was immediately snuffed out. So I had the same idea as everybody else on board. Oh, it must be the pirates. Because they're pirates. Trust no one is kind of a weird lesson for a kid's show. Just saying.
Yeah.
Still bad at spy stuff. Kaz is still bad. Like, he sneaks into the pirate area and he's trying to stealthily check out their power converters. He immediately gets caught by Sonara, which I'm like, okay, I'll forgive that. And then as they're having this quiet conversation, just randomly from outside, there's a pirate just like going, could you keep it down? I'm trying to sleep. So nobody was fooled by him just sneaking in there. They just didn't care. I did put a big all caps note here saying nobody learns anything in the show, which again, I kind of have to accept that you're going to learn the same lessons again and again in a show that's geared towards a younger audience because that's what the shows are meant to do. They're meant to teach those lessons. And it goes back to my issue with Kaz in the first season. Not a ton of character growth in terms of ability. And I think other Star Wars animated series, namely Clone Wars and especially Rebels, did a better job with growing their characters as things went along. That's just the territory. And I have a note here that I don't really know what it means. I'm hoping you can decipher it. It says Kaz should be a diplomat when he's in scream mode. So
I
I'm
don't.
guessing
He
he just
screamed at
like
somebody.
I'm guessing he was just shouting orders and they happened to work well or something. I don't remember. And I was like, I should go back and watch that and see what the hell I meant by that. But I didn't.
Good for you.
Yeah. How about you? What you got on this one?
My notes on this is when they go to investigate the episode or the distress signal. They go out in a star speeder. I couldn't remember if we'd seen one of those in Resistance yet. And just because I'm a big Star Tours fan, that made me happy. Even though it's not the one from the right, it is the one that they use in Rebels that has a RX pilot. So I consider it a Star Tours ship.
Gotcha. I was actually wondering about that because the interior was more dropship looking, but I wasn't sure if it was Star Toursy or not.
It took me a while to get used to Nina because there was something off about her sound mix, like the voice actor's sound mix.
I didn't notice.
And
but...
I couldn't tell if it was when you watch a cartoon and they bring in a celebrity guest star that's never done voiceover work. And like the inflections are kind of strange because they're just reading into a piece of paper.
Right.
Her inflections were strange to me. And so like I had to go on Google see if she was some celebrity they brought in that I didn't know. And she's done voiceover work before and stuff. So I think they just mixed her strangely and I was just picking up something weird. Kind of a super weird nitpick in there because it really doesn't affect anything. It was something weird going on.
It could also have just been a choice because she was playing an alien character. So she might have just given her a weird speaking pattern or a weird inflection pattern or something.
No, it was strange. And then the last note I had on it is when the First Order Star Destroyer shows up and unleashes its waves of TIE fighters. I'm having a hard time reconciling why a TIE fighter's cannon fire would rock the Colossus the way it's depicted because it's a capital ship. Like I've watched Rogue One like 3 times in the last week. When the big Mon Cal cruiser comes in and the swarms of TIE fighters leave the shield generator docking station, that cockpit takes like 40 shots. Or cockpit, flight deck, not flight deck, bridge takes like, 10, 20 shots from blasters. And the admiral's just sitting there like, yeah, that's cool. What's going on down there? Whatever. But in this, like the first order blasts are just rocking the whole ship, and I'm like, that's very strange. Or it's totally plausible because the first order has just they took the Empire stuff and then turned it up to 11. So maybe
Sure.
these things are like mini battleship batteries strapped to the bottom of TIE fighters.
It could also just be the Colossus is not a war vessel, so whatever shields it has are not,
is not good. And that could
yeah.
have been the other thing, is that I know that could have been one of the systems that she chucked down, was the magnetic shielding.
Sure, yeah.
If that's a thing in Star Wars, I get my sci-fi things all mixed up all the time.
Well, there are shields, and apparently if you magnetize things like walls, laser fire just bounces off of them.
Wasn't doing that.
Magnetically sealed, that's the thing.
Overall, for this episode, it had a star speeder in it, so it's gonna get an up. Enjoyed that. One of my notes at the beginning of this was this one would have been better a couple episodes earlier. Having the training episodes on the ice planet closer to some sort of large encounter. That training episode that was 2 episodes back now got me excited for a big battle or event. But then we go into the ice manta ray dragon hunt
Thing.
and then another side adventure.
Yeah.
Now reading this and thinking back, because this is the note that I wrote for the first time I watched this, which was just before we did that first review.
Right.
And now that I'm thinking back on it, the way we watched it this time, we didn't have that build up to a battle. We just kind of started off with the hunt and then we went into this. So the second time I watched it and I wrote my notes down, I didn't feel like something was getting, like a story hook was getting missed. This kind of actually felt like a natural progression. But now looking back, I'm realizing, oh yeah, it did feel like these 2 episodes pulled away from a conflict that was impending and then just faded away.
Right.
And that big conflict still fades away the more we go into like the next episodes.
Absolutely, I agree, and that ties into what I was saying before, the side story to main story ratio.
Yeah.
All right. Once again, I was entertained.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't.
100%.
Yeah, nothing amazing, nothing super special, but also nothing bad. It's just that's been my sort of opinion on Resistance for this entire experience. It's just like it
Nico's
happened.
One of my favorite
I enjoyed
characters. Any time that they have a chance to
do more Nico,
move the focus from Kaz to something that Nico's doing, always makes me happy.
Ready to move on to the next one?
Yep, I don't have a ton of notes on this one.
Neither do I. From Beneath, right?
Correct.
All right. Yeah, the next episode's called From Beneath. And we start off with, I believe they're in that star speeder again.
Yes, they are.
It's Kaz and Tora and Flix and Orca and CB. And they are going to essentially a mining platform that's owned by Flix's family, who
the Colossus has no fuel.
Who are all chicken miners. That is they're chickens who mine. There's this whole idea about how he's entitled to fuel because he's part of the family, and they're talking about that beforehand. So they get there. Flix is saying how his uncle likes him and they'll be fine. His uncle is no longer there and bequeathed the company to one of his cousins who doesn't like him very much. And everybody else that works for him doesn't like him very much because Flix left, as you said.
He left to be a singer?
A cantina singer, yeah. And which I loved it when, they say that, and Orca's immediate response was, yeah, he doesn't talk about that anymore. So there are these quakes that are happening on the planet, and the chicken miners are saying, oh, it's just instability. Flix freaks out because there's some legend about if you dig too deep, you're gonna awaken dragons. This cues an adventure where they make a deal. It's like, hey, you're gonna help us out restarting a drill that we have down there, and then we'll give you your gas. So the team goes down there, the elevator breaks. Flix, his cousin, and Kaz and CB all end up at the bottom, while Orca and Tora end up climbing the elevator gear back up to the top. Shocker, the dragons are real and they're annoyed. And they prove their existence by almost eating everybody, which they all escape. And the cousin ends up swearing, that he'll never dig too deep again. And they go off with their fuel for the Colossus. Flix is hailed as a hero and accepted again into the family. I really enjoyed this just because we got sort of an episode centered around Flix and Orca. And I think they are some of the funnier side characters in this series. And it was kind of cool to see some reaction and interaction there, more than just a quick visit to their shop. What do you think, John?
So, like I said, I don't have a ton of notes on this episode. I'll go right to my overall.
Yeah.
And I think this has to go back to what I was saying in the last episode, that I had forgotten about the first 3 episodes. And so I don't know if I'd say I'd forgotten, but I was able to put aside the whole First Order conflict for the last 3 episodes. And this was like episode 4, but at the same time, it was a fetch quest filler episode that was, hey, this is what people in the galaxy are doing, regardless if they're resistance or First Order. And again, that's something I really, really enjoy. I really exploring in Star Wars. Like, oh, we get to see like how a mining operation would work. And because there isn't the antagonist isn't the First Order, I really feel like they get a chance to, like you said, explore and build the characters of minor or secondary characters.
Right.
If this was all going to be, a whole season was just going to be about Kaz and the First Order, we want to get a story like this dedicated to Flix. There's no way.
Right.
But we did get it, and I thought that was a lot of fun. The first note I have is LOL, the whole they delve too deep story trope. And the moment that someone said, oh, those are rumors, or do you remember the stories that our family told us about the dragons? I was like, oh, please be something different than what I think it's going to be, because it's going to be they delve too deep and awoken something. And I was fine with it. I also thought it was interesting that for a second episode so close to another one, we had dragons.
Right. Brandon. One was a flying air dragon.
Yeah, one was a flying air dragon, and these ones, it looked like the animators wanted to make them fly, but couldn't justify it because they do very flowy aerial maneuvers, but then they also immediately start crawling. And
right.
It looked like they couldn't decide whether or not they wanted them to be flying or aerial or terrestrial dragons. And I enjoyed that a lot. I especially enjoyed that when they roared, they sounded suspiciously a lot like the Tyrannosaurus from the original Jurassic Park.
I noticed that too.
And like, I think it was the same sample, just distorted a little bit. And the fact that I just kept seeing it every time they would roar, and then Kaz realized that if you don't move, they can't see you, which is just nonsense. And I'm like, oh my, I think that these are Jurassic Park Tyrannosaurs. Because why else would you make that if you don't move, they can't see you nonsense?
Yeah, they ended up being like light sensitive or something.
So my specific note for this is Flick's family is great. And then followed by Dragos sound like resample JP Rex's. Vision based on movement too. Flicks will find a way. Much like life. I thought this was just another kind of fun escapade. I don't really want to call it a filler episode.
Yeah, no, that doesn't.
Usually, like filler episodes, you call them that because as like a negative.
Right. Yeah, I hear you, and that's not the connotation.
Yeah.
To give anyway.
I'll call this an escapade.
Sure.
Episode.
So a couple things. I really liked the design of the dragons. I thought they were cool. And, we say the word dragon because that's what they used in the show to describe them. They're really more like armored earthworm snakes. They kind of reminded me of the basilisk from Harry Potter if they stuck a bunch of like rock plates on its head and they had a bunch of like little tiny feet. But I really like their design. The beginning of the episode really felt like a Scooby-Doo episode to me for some reason. One of my favorite lines was when they're arguing about the existence of the dragons. Flix's cousin yells at him, "You might imaginary die." And I really enjoyed that. You better watch out for those imaginary dragons. You might imaginary die. So I thought that was cool. And then there was a really funny moment where Orca and Tora are climbing, and they kind of realize that Orca can't keep up with the climbing speed. And Tora's trying to encourage him, and he's like, well, look at you. You're built for climbing. You're not normal sized like I am. And I appreciate that there was like that inverse of we as humans would consider Orca's species short, but he considers himself normal sized and everybody else giant. And I liked that. I thought that was a nice little line. And then there's this weird moment that threw me off when they get back up to the surface and they announce that there are dragons. I think it was supposed to be like gasps or something, but when Flix's cousin is making the announcement, the rest of them just kind of go, "Ooh!" I was like, "What?"
Maybe that's their culture's gasp.
It really threw me off. I was like, "Yeah, there are people eating dragons below our feet." Ooh, like what? But yeah, again, a fun escapade, as you say. I agree very much. All right, John. I think that that should, we got through what did we do? 4 episodes, 3 episodes,
Three.
3 episodes. We'll wrap that up for now, and then we'll join everybody again for the next 3 or 4 episodes.
Before we wrap up, what do you think about these last three? Do you think the show's gonna get
Overall,
better, or do you think it's gonna stay the same, maybe get worse?
well, based on these 3 episodes themselves, I think it feels like a break in the season,
Hmm.
because, like you said, it kind of peters out the main missions. I do like that we're getting sort of side sort of character development, especially the meta knowledge that we only get one more season, or this season is all we get in terms of Resistance. So it is kind of cool to get a more character-driven, character-focused story because we will end up not visiting these characters again in this form at any rate, as far as we know. So it is kind of cool to get a little bit more backstory on them. Whether or not the season is going to kick up, I think really depends on how they reestablish the overarching plot of Tam and Kaz and crew trying to hook up with the actual
Oh,
Resistance.
we didn't. There wasn't any Tam side stories in these 3 episodes, were
No,
there?
there were none at all. And we don't get one. There's an entire other episode before we even get anything about Tam or the Resistance. But we'll talk about that in the next couple episodes. How about you? What do you think?
These 3 episodes I think I really enjoyed as standalone episodes. I
Right.
think that if like, cause I have a very vague recollection of being bored to death with The Hunt with the first time I watched it, because I had binged watched the first 4 episodes and we only
Hmm.
ended up reviewing 3 of them. And I remember that one and the one after that, I guess that would be 5 if I do my math correctly.
Can confirm.
I remember feeling like they brought the story to a halt,
Right.
but I feel like if the show was more along the lines of just kind of these episodic kind of one-off adventures, I would have enjoyed it as well.
It kind of feels
Instead of
like they're
having storyline that keeps getting interrupted by the escapades sort of thing.
right.
But like I said, these 3 episodes isolated from the beginning of the series, kind of like them like a lot as just kind of a look into what a Star Wars galaxy day in the life is
Sure. It kind of
on a
feels like
runaway
they
space platform.
kind of feels like they tried to combine the single group storytelling the of Rebels with the more episodic one-off structure of Clone Wars, and that hybrid just isn't being balanced. The pacing is thrown off. When we started, we're going like, oh, let's get through this again. It kind of felt like it was going to be a chore, but after watching these episodes, I am looking forward to seeing the end of the season and getting through the rest of them and tying this up because it is Star Wars. I am enjoying it. Do I like it as much as some of the other projects that they've done? Maybe not, but it's not specifically geared toward me as an audience member, but I can still appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah,
So I'm having a good time.
I
All
agree.
right.
I agree with that.
So we'll catch you guys again here. We're going to close this up. Thank you for listening to this episode of Hoth Topics, a podcast about Star Wars. Coming up next, we're going to do some more Resistance Recon, and then we'll catch up with Clone Wars. And depending on how long this whole quarantine thing lasts, we might have a couple other things we'll try to experiment with and bring new content to you guys. Like us to do any other topics or fun stuff that you guys would want to see, go ahead and send us an email at hothpod@gmail.com. or tweet at us on the Twitter at HothPod. You can always visit our website, hothtopicspodcast.com as well, if you have any other questions or comments or want to see previous episodes or even some cool projects and opinion pieces and costume builds that John's working on, all that kind of good fun stuff. I've been Ian.
I just realized that I have a folder full of updates for that Star Tours ground crew costume that I should put on the website, or I should edit the episode.
That's John debating what content that we are overflowing with currently he is going to put up for you. Thank you very much, everybody. We will see you next time.